You're not tired because you worked too hard today. You didn't run a marathon. You didn't pull an all-nighter. You went to a dinner party. You had a few conversations, you drove home. And now you're completely, utterly drained, in a way you can't explain to anyone who wasn't there. This isn't physical exhaustion. This is something else. There's a specific type of person who experiences the world at a higher resolution than most. They walk into a room and immediately feel the tension between two people who haven't spoken yet. They notice when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes. They pick up on the slight shift in tone, that microsecond where someone's voice changed and no one else seemed to catch it. They are almost always the most socially careful person in any room. They choose their words thoughtfully. They anticipate how things will land before they say them. They manage the invisible, emotional architecture of every conversation they're part of. And they are exhausted. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way that earns any sympathy, because from the outside, they seem fine. They're functioning. They're showing up. They're doing the thing. But inside they're running 1,000 background processes that no one can see. If you grew up being described as too sensitive, or you've always felt like you were slightly out of step with how casually other people move through the world, then you probably know this feeling intimately. You finish a perfectly ordinary day and you feel like you lived 3 of them. You cancel plans not because you don't want to see people, but because you know that being around people means being on. Reading, tracking, adjusting. And you simply don't have the bandwidth. You lie awake replaying a conversation, not because something went wrong, but because your brain is still processing it, still filing it away, still asking, did I catch everything? Did I say the right thing? Did I miss something? This is the life of someone who notices too much. And today, I want to talk about why it's so draining. Not to diagnose you, not to fix you, but because I think most people who experience this have never had it reflected back to them accurately. Let's start with what's actually happening in the brain. Psychologists have a concept called cognitive load. It refers to the total amount of mental effort being used at any given time. Think of it like RAM on a computer. Every task you're running costs memory. The more processes you have open, the slower everything gets. Most people move through a social situation running a handful of processes. They track the conversation. They respond. They maybe notice if someone seems upset. But hyper-aware people, they're running a parallel system on top of all of that. They're tracking facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, what wasn't said, what changed from 5 minutes ago, what subtext might be underneath the surface conversation, how the energy in the room shifted when that one person walked in. All simultaneously, all automatically, all without choosing to. The critical word there is automatically. This isn't something they decide to do. It's not a skill they're consciously applying. It's just how their brain processes the world. The way some people can't help but hear every instrument in a song separately, even when they're just trying to enjoy the music. And automatic processing, contrary to what you might think, still costs energy. It still costs. By the time they leave a social situation, they haven't just been present. They've been on, running full scan, processing everything in real time. Now layer on top of that a second factor, empathy. High awareness and high empathy are not the same thing, but they very frequently travel together. When you're wired to notice everything, you don't just observe other people's emotional states. You feel them. Someone else's discomfort becomes a low hum you carry. Someone else's tension becomes a problem you feel personally responsible for solving, even when it has absolutely nothing to do with you. Psychologist Elaine Aron, who spent decades researching what she called highly sensitive people, found that this group doesn't process stimulation differently just in terms of quantity. They process it more deeply. They sit with information longer. They connect it to more things. They extract more meaning from a single moment than the average person would. That depth is a gift. It produces extraordinary creativity, intuition, and relational intelligence. But it also means that every emotional encounter carries more weight. The argument you overheard between co-workers? You're still carrying it at 4 p.m. The friend who seemed slightly off today? You've been holding that in the background all afternoon, quietly worrying. You are not just experiencing your own life, you are experiencing everyone's life. A little bit, all the time. Whether you want to or not. And here's the part that's the hardest to talk about. There's a gap between what hyper-aware people perceive and what they can actually share with the people around them. They see something. They feel something. They know something about the dynamic in the room, about what's really going on under the surface of a conversation, and they look around and realize no one else seems to be tracking this. Sometimes they say something and they get a blank look. What? No, it's fine. And they have to decide, do I trust my perception or do I defer to the consensus that everything is normal? Over time, many of them learn to go quiet, to let it go, to stop naming what they see, because naming it too often makes you look paranoid or oversensitive, or like you're reading into things. So they carry it alone. And that aloneness, that specific kind of aloneness of being in a room full of people and perceiving a completely different reality from everyone around you, is its own form of exhaustion. Not the exhaustion of doing. The exhaustion of witnessing, of holding what you know, of being a receiver with no one on the other end of the signal. I want to be careful here. This video is not about convincing you that being highly aware is a burden you must endure. I don't believe that. But I do think there's a damaging story that many perceptive people have absorbed about themselves. A story that goes something like, I'm too much. I feel too much. I notice too much. If I could just relax, just stop overthinking, just be more like everyone else, I'd be fine. That story is wrong. The goal isn't to notice less. The goal is to stop being surprised by the cost of noticing more. Your exhaustion is not weakness. It is information. It's telling you that your nervous system has been working overtime, that your internal processor has been running at capacity, that you are, and this is important, genuinely spending more cognitive and emotional energy in a given day than most people around you. That means you need more recovery. Not because you're fragile, because you're doing more. A marathon runner doesn't feel guilty for needing more food than someone who sat at a desk all day. The output is different. The recovery requirement is different. Your awareness is the marathon. The rest is the fuel. So what do you actually do with this? I'm not going to give you a list of 5 tips, but I will say one thing that I think is underrated. Give yourself permission to name it, to yourself. Not to prove anything to anyone else, not to justify canceling plans or leaving early, just internally, this is what's happening. I am running at capacity. This is what my tired actually looks like. Because so much of the secondary exhaustion, the exhaustion on top of the actual exhaustion, comes from arguing with yourself about whether your experience is valid. It is. You are not making it up. You are not being dramatic. You are not broken. You are just built to see more, and that takes something. If something in this video felt true for you, I'd genuinely love to know. Leave a comment, even just one word, because if you've been living in that gap, feeling like no one quite clocks what you're carrying, I want you to know that some of us do. And if there's someone in your life who's always described as too sensitive, too intense, too much, maybe send this to them. Not to fix them, just so they know they're not alone. I'll see you in the next one.